Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to Wild Werewolf. Are you ready to embark on a wild and thrilling journey into the world of werewolves? Here, we'll explore the untamed nature, the raw power, and the captivating stories of these mythical creatures. So, get comfortable and let's unleash the wildness together. Werewolf Forest, Chapter 30 for recap. Goodbye, brother, he whispered. There was a loud snap as Connor jerked Danny's head to the side in a quick movement. Danny's body fell to the ground, limp and hollow as ever. With the death of their leader, the last of Danny's pack fled into the woods. I caught a glimpse of Gage as he ran away with the rest of them. We were all silent, staring around at each other. We were injured, exhausted, and soaked in the blood of our kind. Our eyes drooped in sorrow, and we held our limbs in pain. We looked around at our fallen comrades, our friends, our family. They stared at us with their dead eyes, and we could not help but to stare back. Connor called out to what remained of his pack, "Carry the wounded and as many of our dead as you can. Well, return for the rest. It's over. Let's go home." Chapter 30 for the wind blew across the field, still stained with blood. Not a living thing was there. The only thing left were the bodies of James and Jason. We had taken all the other bodies, even those of Danny's pack. Connor carried Danny himself. He wanted to bury his brother. We returned the ones we could to their families, and the others were buried in a makeshift graveyard a mile or two from the house. The house was filled with packed bags and boxes. Those who could were going home to their families. Some were leaving to start a new life somewhere and put this secret war behind them. But for now, we were all here, convened in the courtyard under the shining full moon. We had just gotten back from the graveyard, where we said our last goodbyes. We were all dressed in black, many of the guys wearing suits or ties. There were few that weren't covered in bandages. I myself had a cast in a sling on one arm and bandages around my ribs. Andrew had about 50 stitches in various places and a broken nose. The injuries were extensive, but we would all be healed in a matter of days. However, there were people who lay in the infirmary who would take longer to recover. Every bed had been filled, and the ones that were worse were sent to a hospital. Connor stood on top of the picnic table and called out to his pack, "We have lost many good people, and we will miss them all dearly." He looked around at all of us with sullen eyes. He knew how much we all lost, how much we sacrificed, and Drew reached down and griped my hand. "I want to thank them, as well as all of you, for staying with me and fighting by my side. Our chances were thin, but we prevailed, though not without great losses. We gather here tonight to honor them and to say our goodbyes. We have put our friends to rest, and may they sleep in peace, knowing that they fought for a just cause and took part in extinguishing a threat to all mankind." He pulled a small piece of paper out of his jacket pocket. "Please take a moment of silence as I read the names of our fallen pack, mate." He began to read off names, most of which I didn't know. Leonard Rhodes, Gunnar Hillman, Peter Wyatt. I watched the faces of the crowd as they winced at the names, as tears dropped from their eyes. Gerald Borders, Jenny Hacker, Tina Finch. The list of names went on and on. Almost 100 names were listed. But there were only two that cut at my heart: Kyle McGraw, Ellie Rivera. Connor's face T-waned as he said Ella's name. Enmer squeezed my hand tight in his. The reassuring contact helped the pain in my chest, but it didn't cure it. I could still see Kyle's face. "No," I screamed. "Kyle." James looked up, the knife still above his head. It was as if I was there again. When my friends died, I came to his side and knelt on the ground. He had his hand at his chest where blood was seeping out of the knife wound. Before I could stop him, he gripped the handle and yanked it out of his chest. Blood poured to the ground, bubbling out of the wound like lava. I pressed my hands to the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. The blood poured out from between my fingers as if they weren't even there. One thing was left ringing in my head. Take my body to my parents, they already know about all this. He reached to his neck and gripped a small rosary on a thin silver chain. And tell an I'm sorry and that I love her with his last bit of strength. He yanked the chain from his neck. Give this to her, don't let her forget me. I held that chain in my hand now, squeezing until it left marks. There were things left unsolved, things left for me to finish. When Connor had read through the list of names, he folded the paper and put it back in his pocket. Now, he said, clearing his throat, even with the loss of our dearest friends, tonight we can welcome 2 new members into our pack. I would like to propose the addition of Maggie and Davo. All council members in favor. I watched as the hands of every council member raised their hand. And Drew held his arm high in the air, looked down at me, and smiled. I looked around and saw Sasha with her hand up. She looked over to me too and nodded. I nodded back, a small smile pulling at my lips. I searched out Davo in the crowd. His eyes were wide with shock and apprehension, as so many people were looking at him. He smiled, but I could see something else in his eyes. Then it's official. Maggie, Davo, welcome to the pack. The crowd cheered and clapped, patting us on the back and congratulating us. Now, in honor of the lives of our fallen friends, and our sacrifice for our victory, let us celebrate their memory. And also the addition of our 2 new pack members. There's plenty of food for everyone. He gestured to the house. Through the window, we could see buffets set up in the living room. Music started to play softly from the house. Go dig in and enjoy yourselves, everyone. You've all earned it. The crowd flowed into the house, cheering and laughing on the way. Davo stayed behind, staring up at the stars. You go ahead, I told Andrew. I looked over at Davo meaningfully. He'll be in soon. All right, he said, no hint of jealousy in his eyes now. I leaned down and kissed my forehead. Come find me when you're done. He walked into the house and joined his friends. Hey, I said. Davo turned but wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked back up at the stars and he sat on the cool grass. I'm not staying. Pix, he said, still not looking at me. Narrate, Spidey, my faded mate. White splashed away me and the wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Why not? He smiled, bittersweet and sad. I can't stay here. He looked down at his hands. You know, in times of tragedy, a time like we've both been through, it makes it very easy to fall in love with someone. He looked over at me meaningfully, pain and passion burning in his eyes. I'm sorry, Davo. No, don't apologize. He reached down and grabbed my hand, squeezing it reassuringly before letting go. I'm happy for you. Really, I guess you were always meant to be with him. I just can't stay here and watch it. He looked back up to the stars. Maybe you'll go looking for my parents. I have no idea where they are, but I can't lie. Then, I got an idea. If he couldn't be happy here because of me, I was going to make damn sure he could be happy somewhere else. Tell me more about them. What are their names? He smiled. Ronald and Sarah Loader. They always hated being called Mr. or Mrs. Narrate, Spidey, my faded mate. White splashed around me and my wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. They said it made them feel old. He laughed. They always insisted people call them Ron and Sarah. No exceptions. Except for me, of course. I always just called them Mom and Dad. They're really good people. I don't want to subject them to this. He looked down at his hands and clenched them into fists. To what I am, Davo. They will love you no matter what. You're either son. I put my hands around his fist. You are not a monster. Davo. You're still their child. I turned his chin so he would look at me. You're a good person. You risked your lives for us. For humans, that means something. You will find your parents, and when you do, they will be proud of you for what you've done. They will welcome you home. He smiled and wrapped his arms around me. Thank you, Pix. You're welcome. Now come on. Let's go get some food. We walked into the house and we were greeted with hugs and congratulations. Davo gave me a slight smile and left to speak with Connor. I searched through the crowd and found Andrew. When he saw me, he wrapped his arms around my waist and pressed his lips to mine. Hi, he said, smiling. I laughed and kissed his cheek. Hey, lovebirds. Donnie strolled out of the crowd towards us. Keep it to a minimum. I want to protect my innocence. I ain't been innocent since grade school. Man, Luke shoved his shoulder. Leave them alone. Will ya? Y'all irritate the shit out of M as it is hay. Donnie put his hand over his chest, feigning hurt. That hurts, Lukey. You love me anymore. He sniffed, pretending to cry. Come on, dumbass. Let's go. Luke grabbed Donnie's arm and started pulling him away. Hey guys. Hang on, I said. They stopped and turned back to me. Kyle said something to me. Does the name mean anything to you? A confused look crossed both of their faces. No, I got nothing, said Donnie. Sorry, kid. How about you, Luke? No, me neither. Sorry. Luke shrugged his shoulders. But hey, all this time, I seen him turn down some pretty fine women. Maybe that's his girl or something. All right. Thanks, guys. See ya, kid. Have fun tonight. Donnie winked at me. Luke rolled his eyes and pulled him away again. Hey, you kids be safe now. Remember health class. Don't be silly. Protect your willy. If it's bare, don't put it in there. And Drew rolled his eyes as Donnie disappeared into the crowd. Donnie Andrews shook his head. I laughed. Yep, that's our Donnie. We celebrated, laughing and dancing and eating. We stayed for morning, instead remembering our loved ones in the happiest of times. The party began to thin, more and more people leaving for bed or a run under the moon. I think I'm going to go for a run before I go to bed, said Andrew, stretching his arm across his chest. Want to join me? No thanks, I said. There's something I want to take care of. Do you know where Kyle's bags are? Yeah, they're in my room. Okay, good. And can you look something up for me when you get back? I pulled a pen out of my pocket and wrote Ronald and Sarah Loader on his arm. I mean, there's a computer somewhere around here, right? Yeah, he'll take care of it. But I don't understand. What's going on? He looked down at the names on his arm quizzically. There are some things I need to figure out. Some promises I need to keep. I'll explain later. I gotta go. I ran up the stairs and into Andrew's room. I had a promise to keep to Kyle. I found his duffel bag in the corner by the window. I zipped it open, finding wrinkled bundles of clothing. I shifted through them, but only found more clothing in a small, worn pocket Bible. But at the very bottom was a picture frame. I pulled it out of the clusters of fabric that had been stuffed carelessly in the duffel bag. Behind the scratched, clear plastic, there was a small picture of Kyle with his arm around a woman, a small baby in their arms. Another man stood behind them, his arms around their shoulders as he looked lovingly down at the baby. I took the picture out of the frame and read the back. Mark Spidey, my fated mate. White splashed around me and my wheels spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Kyle, Sophie, and on a June 172,007. I could barely see the baby's face under her blankets and little pink hat. Her little nose and lips just barely stood out. The girl was just barely shorter than Kyle and had long dark, blonde hair. Her eyes were a crisp blue and looked down at the baby with love and exhaustion in her eyes. I had never met Kyle's family. No one had. He never really talked about them, even to us, and we accepted that. We all had things to bear, so we never questioned his secrecy. All we knew was his parents lived across the country, and he only got to see them on occasion. I lightly touched the faces of people, and my heart ached at the sight of Kyle's grin. I took the picture with me as I walked back to my room. "Hey, Maggie." I turned to see Andrew running down the hallway. I stuffed the picture in my back pocket as quickly as I could as he got nearer and wrapped his around me. There's still some food downstairs, and Connor Dawson wanted to go to waste. Bailey, Davo, Donnie, and Luke are all down there too. Why don't we join them? Have a little snack before we go to bed. Sure, I said, quickly kissing his cheek. He'll be right down, okay? I'm just going to change into a t-shirt. Okay, see ya. He kissed my forehead and walked toward the stairs. I quickly ran to my room and put the picture under my pillow. I left it there to wait for me as I went downstairs to join my friends. We ate for a while, laughed and talked. As the night lost its youth, we all went to bed. Our wounds were throbbing, our minds heavy as lead, but for the first night in so long, we could sleep in peace. Werewolf Forest to Chapter 35 recap. There are some things I need to figure out. Some promises I need to keep. I'll explain later. I gotta go. I ran up the stairs and into Andrew's room. I had a promise to keep to Kyle. I found his duffel bag in the corner by the window. I zipped it open, finding wrinkled bundles of clothing. I shifted through them, but only found more clothing in a small, worn pocket Bible. But at the very bottom was a picture frame. I pulled it out of the clusters of fabric that had been stuffed carelessly in the duffel bag. Behind the scratched, clear plastic, there was a small picture of Kyle with his arm around a woman, a small baby in their arms. Another man stood behind them, his arms around their shoulders as he looked lovingly down at the baby. I took the picture out of the frame and read the back. Mark Spidey, my fated mate. Lights flashed around me and my room spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Kyle, Sophie, and in a June 172,007. I could barely see the baby's face under her blankets and little pink hat. Her little nose and lips just barely stood out. The girl was just barely shorter than Kyle and had long dark blonde hair. Her eyes were a crisp blue and looked down at the baby with love and exhaustion in her eyes. I had never met Kyle's family. No one had. He never really talked about them, even to us, and we accepted that. We all had things to bear, so we never questioned his secrecy. All we knew was his parents lived across the country, and he only got to see them on occasion. I lightly touched the faces of people, and my heart ached at the sight of Kyle's grin. I took the picture with me as I walked back to my room. "Hey, Maddie." I turned to see Andrew running down the hallway. I stuffed the picture in my back pocket as quickly as I could as he got nearer and wrapped his around me. There's still some food downstairs, and Connor doesn't want it to go to waste. Bailey, Davo, Donnie, and Luke are all down there too. Why don't we join them? Have a little snack before we go to bed. Sure, I said, quickly kissing his cheek. He'll be right down okay. I'm just going to change into a t-shirt. Okay, see ya. He kissed my forehead and walked toward the stairs. I quickly ran to my room and put the picture under my pillow. I left it there to wait for me as I went downstairs to join my friends. We ate for a while, laughed and talked. As the night lost its youth, we all went to bed. Our wounds were throbbing, our minds heavy as lead, but for the first night in so long, we could sleep in peace. Chapter 35. We had just come from the church, the smell of the incense still stuck in my black clothing. Enra held my hand as we walked behind the burgundy coffin to the gravesite. It had only been about 4 days since the battle. I still had my cast on and Andrew still had his stitches in. Tears still filled our eyes at our loss. I could hear the mourners around me whisper prayers and gently sing hymns. They all had their heads bowed in silence, and some clung to loved ones, somehow walking as one entangled within itself. This was how Andrew and I walked. Donnie and Luke trailed along behind us, their black suits pressed to solemn perfection. It was the first time I had seen them in something other than tea, shirts, and jeans since we had met. They each held a white carnation in their hand, as did many of the people. Andrew held two in his hand, as my hands were busy clutching to him in sorrow. When we got to the gravesite, they prepared to lower the coffin. The preacher said a few words about how we would all meet Kyle again in heaven someday, and how God always has a reason for his actions. He said a prayer and we repeated after him as the casket was slowly lowered into the ground. One by one, people threw the white flowers into the pit with him. I watched as each puff of white was swallowed by the grave, sinking into that black hole. Then, for but a second, there was a flash of red in the sea of white. I watched as a woman, clad in a long black dress with her blonde hair pulled into a bun, tossed a blood red rose into the pit. As if sensing I was looking at her, she turned and looked at me with her crisp blue eyes for a moment. I kept watching as she turned from the grave and picked up a small figure dressed in a black dress and stark white tights. I let go of Andrew and slowly walked to them, as not to disturb the mourners. I could feel Andrew's confusion and worry, but I sent him a wave of calm and reassurance, letting him know that everything was all right. I wanted to tell him, but Kyle had kept this a secret for a reason. He had entrusted it to me with his dying breath, and I wouldn't tell anyone until I was sure he would be okay with it. As I approached the woman carrying the child, she turned and saw me. Her eyes widened and turned into the crowd, trying to get away. But I had speed on my side, and I carefully and quietly cut her off. She looked shocked and gasped as she saw me in her path. She placed her hand on the young girl in her arms, clutching her protectively. A small golden band glistened on her finger. She began to back away. "That's Spidey, my fated mate." White splashed around me and the wind spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. Wait, in Maggie Burks, a good friend of Kyle's. She still didn't seem convinced. I pulled the rosary out of my pocket. "He told me to give this to you. Anna." Her blue eyes narrowed at me. "I'm Sophie," said the woman. The little girl lifted her head from the girl's shoulder. She was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a braided ponytail which rested on her black dress. She looked at me with her green eyes, inspecting me with a confident curiosity, a look Kyle had given all of us, time and time again. Her voice was as soft as silk and melodious like a harp. It almost seemed as if she was singing. "My name is Anna. You knew my daddy." Sophie had, understandably, not wanted to talk the day of the funeral. She had said Kyle had told her about me, and that he wouldn't have given the rosary to just anyone. So she had invited me over to come to her home the next day. Connor had lent me a Jeep with a GPS and I had entered the address into it. I followed the directions for over an hour before I got there. I stopped in front of a small light blue house. I pulled the piece of paper out of my pocket and checked the writing on the back. The address matched up, so I got out of the Jeep and walked to the door. I put my hand in my pocket and gripped the thin chain and rosary. There was no doorbell, so I knocked on the door. After a few moments, an older woman opened the door. She was dressed in all black, yes. She said in a gruff voice, "Hi, my name is Maggie Burks." I was a friend of Kyle McGraw. She looked at me skeptically. Sophie invited me over. I pulled the rosary out of my pocket and showed it to her. I was with him when he told me give this to Anna. The woman nodded. "Come in," she said, opening the door wider and letting me in. "Have a seat." She gestured to an old-looking paisley couch. I sat down on it. The couch had a homey feeling, like it had a million stories to tell, and it was as if it hugged your body as you sat. Sophia and Anna will be back from the store any minute. So you knew my son-in-law, she said as she sat down beside me. Son-in-law. So you're Sophia's mother then? I asked. Yes, I am. Would you like anything to drink? Oh no, thank you, I said. Just then I heard the sound of the door opening. Gamma. Anna ran into the house into the old woman, her blonde curls bouncing around her face. She wore a pink dress and a purple headband, the little dimples at the edge of her grin making her face all the more innocent. It looked as if she had never been touched by a bad memory. She leapt into the woman's lap and hugged her. Hi, Gamma. Hello, sweetheart, said the woman as she kissed the little girl's forehead. Sophie walked in the door behind her. Hello, Maggie. I see you've met my mother, she said, putting some brown grocery bags on the floor. Yes, she has, said the old woman. She turned to me. Do you remember Maggie from yesterday? She was a friend of your father's. Izzy said, waving her little hand at me. Hyena, I said. I meant to give this to you yesterday. I held out the rosary. And it jumped off the woman's lap and crawled onto mine. That was my daddy's, she said. Yeah, it was. And now it's yours, looking closer at her eyes. I could see so much of Kyle in them. A little bit his wisdom, his age beyond his own, was in her deep emerald eyes. He loved you very much. Anna, very much. He told me to tell you that, and to give you this. I undid the hitch and put the chain around her neck. Oh, she said as she traced the cross with her dainty finger. It hung a little low on her small frame, but she seemed to like it. Look, Gamma. Look, Mommy. Pretty. Yes, it's very pretty, dear. Sophie smiled at her. It looks beautiful on you. Sophie sat down on the couch. I think I will go get some tea, said the old woman, nodding to Sophie. Nina, dear, why don't you come help me? She held her hand out to the little girl. Okay, Gamma, she said, following her into the kitchen. If you don't mind me asking, I said, turning to Sophie, when were you and Kyle married? I mean, I knew him for years and I didn't even know he was dating. Well, we met when I was 18 and he was 17. We got married a year and a half later. 2 years later, we decided to have a child. Then we had she has his eyes, she smiled then, sat and reminiscing, tracing the band on her finger. We were young, but we were happy and very well off. Something you might not know is his family is very rich, and he ran the sector of their company here. That's where I work too, so we felt we were able to do what we did, get married and have a child. And it worked out very well. But yes, we kept it very secret. With the fames he was involved in, he didn't want anyone to be able to use me or Anna against him, or have any motive to hurt us. So you know then, I asked. Weary, he told you. Yes, first about the freedom fighters. I kept telling him to rename it. I always thought it was kind of cheesy. She chuckled. But he stuck to it. Always told me he loved the name and lived by it. Then, when he found out about the wolves and decided to join, he told me all about that too. Always did want to save the world, I smiled, knowing she was right about Kyle. Doesn't know about the wolves. No, I never told her. My mother either. She looked toward the kitchen, making sure no one was coming. We decided it was best kept a secret. One day I made Alana, but I'm not sure. Now I have a question for you. Are you a wolf? She looked at me with bold confidence, but under it, I could see fear. Yes, I am. But I'm one of the good guys. I was a good friend to Kyle and all the freedom fighters. We were like family. I saw some tension release from her eyes. But she still held fear, like she was looking at a bear, not a girl. I understand that it must be an odd concept. That's Spidey, my fated mate. White splashed around me and my wheels spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. God knows it took me a while to grasp it. But if you ever need help with anything, what's left of the freedom fighters, and I would be here in a heartbeat. And more of my pack if you should need it. She cringed at the word pack but nodded. You'll remember that, I guess, now. Since it's all over, it doesn't matter if the rest of his friends know about us. I would like to talk to other people who knew him, she said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cell phone. Kyle had this. He said it was given to him by a man Connor. He gave me one too, in case I needed him. They act like walkie-talkies. I guess they can only call each other and the police. With your offer, I guess you should take it. She handed me the phone. All right. If you or ever needs anything, you just call. She nodded. Mom, she called. Could you grab some water for Maggie and I? I could tell she was letting her mother know it was all right to come back in now. Yes, of course, dear. The old woman walked back to the room with 2 glasses of water and placed them on the coffee table in front of the couch. It was easy to feel the tension in the air. I could feel that Sophie wasn't quite comfortable with the idea of werewolves, which was understandable. She seemed weary of me and kept an eye on my movements. I was offended. I would feel the same way in her position. I bounced back into the room, nibbling on a chocolate chip cookie. She was the only sense of ease in the room, her face shining with beautiful ignorance. She jumped onto the couch and crawled her way on a Sophia's lap. You guys should have this too, I said, pulling the picture of Sophie, Kyle, and then out of my pocket. I handed it to Sophie. Her chin twitched as she traced Kyle's face with the tip of her finger. She wrapped an arm tighter around Anna. Thank you, she whispered. Look, Mommy. It's you and Daddy, Anna said, pointing at the picture in her mother's hand. Yes, sweetheart. And that's you. Sophie pointed to Anna in the picture. Anna squinted at it, then smiled and giggled. Now go wash up, Anna. I'm going to make dinner soon. Anna looked over at me expectantly. Can Maggie stay, Mommy? I like her. I really should be going, actually, I said, standing up. But you'll come visit me, right, Auntie Maggie? She looked up at me so adoringly. I smiled at her calling me Auntie. I looked over at Sophie. She nodded and I took that to mean I should say yes. Yeah, they'll come visit you and a yai. She jumped up and down, clapping her hands. She ran past us and CLOMB'd up the stairs, her hands still clapping away and her laughter filling the air like the chiming of silver bells. The old woman led me to the door. You can call me Louise. By the way, she said. I hope you do come visit. I know my daughter would love to talk with you about Kyle. And Anna has really taken to you. I will, I promised. Werewolf Forest to Chapter 36 recap. I think I'm going to go for a run before I go to bed, said Andrew, stretching his arm across his chest. Want to join me? No thanks, I said. There's something I want to take care of. Do you know where Kyle's bags are? Yeah, they're in my room. Okay, good. And can you look something up for me when you get back? I pulled a pen out of my pocket and wrote Ronald and Cyril Oder on his arm. I mean, there's a computer somewhere around here, right? Yeah, he'll take care of it. But I don't understand. What's going on? He looked down at the names on his arm quizzically. There are some things I need to figure out. Some promises I need to keep. I'll explain later. I gotta go. I ran up the stairs and into Andrew's room. You guys should have this too, I said, pulling the picture of Sophie, Kyle, and then out of my pocket. I handed it to Sophie. Her chin twitched as she traced Kyle's face with the tip of her finger. She wrapped an arm tighter around Ola. Thank you, she whispered. Look, Mommy. It's you and Daddy, Anna said, pointing at the picture in her mother's hand. Yes, sweetheart. And that's you. Sophie pointed to Anna in the picture. Anna squinted at it, then smiled and giggled. Now go wash up, Anna. I'm going to make dinner soon. Anna looked over at me expectantly. Can Maggie stay, Mommy? I like her. I really should be going, actually, I said, standing up. But you'll come visit me, right, Auntie Maggie? She looked up at me so adoringly. I smiled at her calling me Auntie. I looked over at Sophie. She nodded, and I took that to mean I should say yes. Yeah, they'll come visit you in a yai. She jumped up and down, flapping her hands. She ran past us and CLOMP'd up the stairs, her hands still clapping away and her laughter filling the air like the chiming of silver bells. The old woman led me to the door. You can call me Louise. By the way, she said, I hope you do come visit. I know my daughter would love to talk with you about Kyle. And Emma has really taken to you. I will, I promised. Chapter 36. Are you going to tell me where we're going or not? Asked Davo. He sat in the passenger side of the Jeep Connor lent to me again, arms crossed in frustration. If I haven't already, do you really think I'm going to? It had been almost a month, so my arm was fully healed, as was Davo. He had announced his decision to leave a week or two ago, and Connor let him know there was always a place for him at the pack, and that he was part of our family wherever he went. But Connor had insisted he stay for a while more, until they were sure his injuries were all healed, and he could get him some provisions for his trip, wherever he decided to go. So Davo decided to stay until everything was in order and our injuries were reduced to scars of a past dark age. I had only found the right address a few days before that anyway, so his decision to wait had helped. I had to call several homes before I found the right one. The final loose ends were being tied together, the last stories finally having a conclusion. The GPS in the Jeep beeped in its monotone voice. Your destination is on the right. Davo looked out the window and his eyes widened in shock. That's my house, he looked back at me. What are we doing at my old house? I pulled the article that Enru had found out of my pocket. There was a picture of Davo there in black and white, his smiling face set up against the stereotypical school picture background. I handed it to Davo. He looked at it, dumbfounded. When you disappeared, I explained. Your father quit his job and found one locally, so that they could stay here. It's all there, in the article. They wanted to stay in case one day you found your way home. When the case went cold and the police stopped searching, they started to look for themselves, putting posters up, raising awareness, that sort of thing. He looked back and forth from the article to the house to me and back again. They never gave up hope that their son would come home. But he looked to me and locked eyes. You mean there and there? My mom and dad are in there right now. Well, they should be. It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Don't know where else they would be except home. Home, he whispered. He looked over at the house. It was a stout little brick house. A small garden flourished with hundreds of flowers right under a window framed with blue shutters. The door matched the shutters and had a brown welcome mat laying out in front of it. There was a small porch with a rocking chair faced out toward the street. I pulled the keys out of the ignition and opened my door. Davo still sat there, still as stone. I opened his door for him and held out my hand. Come on, Davo. It'll be okay. Trust me. He looked at me apprehensively, but took my hand and stepped out of the Jeep. He walked behind me all the way to the door. The tension was almost unbearable as I pushed the doorbell. I could hear Davo take a quick breath and hold it as the sound of someone walking down the steps came from behind the door. The door slowly creaked open. A woman in a robe and slippers stood behind the door. She was petite, her small frame looked like a delicate porcelain doll. Her bright red hair was pinned up in a messy bun on the top of her head. Sarah Loader, I asked. Yes, who are you? She squinted at me, obviously missing her glasses. My name is Maggie, and I've brought someone who has really missed you. I grabbed a stupefied Davo and pulled him into her line of sight. When she saw him, Her eyes went wide and she gasped, throwing her hands over her mouth in shock. She squinted, as if unsure if she was seeing what she hoped. But even without her glasses, she still recognized her son. She walked forward slowly and reached out her shaking hand. She went to touch him, as if she were unsure if he were only a dream. She placed her hand on his chest and, when she realized he was real, clasped her hands on the sides of his face. "Davo," she muttered. He was silent for a moment. He slowly put his hand on top of hers as she caressed his face. "Yeah," he said, his eyes growing red with forced, back tears. "Yeah, it's me, Mum." She burst into tears, throwing her arms around his waist. Davo enveloped her small body in his arms. Sarah, who is it?" A voice called from inside the house. "Oh, Ron, come look," she called through her tears. She let go of Davo but kept a firm hold on his hand as if she were afraid that if she let go, he would disappear again. A man came from around the door. He was in his pajamas too, and carried a coffee mug in his hand. "What is its era?" So when he saw his son, he dropped his mug, the coffee spilling out of the shattered ceramic. He looked unsure and looked to his wife. She nodded to his as if to say yes. "It's real." "Yes, HES back." Son, he staggered over to his family and threw his arms around both of them. They fell to the ground, embracing each other and crying in joy. I could hear faint whispers of "I missed you" and "I love you." They slowly got up, still keeping some form of contact with each other. "Where have you been? Are you all right?" Davo's mother began grabbing Davo's arms and looking him over for any sort of injury. Of course, she found the array of scars he had acquired in his time with Danny, as well as the ones from the battle. "Oh my God. What happened to you?" "I'll explain everything later, Mum. I promise. For right now, I'm just glad to be home, Ben." His parents turned to me. They looked from me to Davo quizzically. "Mom, Dad, this is Maggie. She's helped me a lot over the time I've been gone. She brought me home." His mom ran over and hugged me. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for bringing my baby home." "My pleasure," I said. She backed away and wiped her eyes. "I was just making some late breakfast. Won't you come in and join us?" I would if I could, but I can't. I have to take care of some other things. But thank you anyway. "Can I speak to Maggie alone for just a moment?" His parents looked apprehensive. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise. I just want to say goodbye." His father nodded, but his mother clung to his arm tighter, unwilling to let her son out of her sight. "Come on, Sarah. Let the boy say his goodbyes." His mother looked unsure but followed her husband into the house. Davo wrapped his arms around me. "Thank you, Pix. Thank you so much. I owed you this at least, Davo." He smiled. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Davo's mother poke her head through the curtains on the window, just to make sure Davo was still there. "Go be with your family. And remember, no matter where you are always family. If you need us, you know how to find us." I tapped my temple and winked at him. With the acceptance of the pack, and the time since then, we had formed the mind connection that the rest of the pack had. If Davo ever needed us, he simply had to find us with his thoughts. "I know." He leaned down and kissed my cheek. "Goodbye, Pix. I'll miss ya." "Goodbye, Davo." He turned and walked at his door. He paused for a moment, staring at the doorknob for a moment before taking a breath and opening the door. He stepped in and closed it behind him. I couldn't help but smile as I walked back to the Jeep. I was happy that I could help give Davo's family back to him. He deserved to have them back. By the time I got back to the house, the moon was climbing in the sky. I found Connor up in the library, staring at his papers as usual. "Hey, Connor." "Hey, Maggie," he said without turning. "There have been people showing up all day. People that were first into Danny's pack and have no life to return to. Are you going to let them stay? For now, yes. After further review, we will do our best to make sure none of them are a threat. But from the looks of it, anyone still loyal to Danny has scattered, probably regrouped somewhere. But they aren't a threat. They have no backing, no financials, no power. So we hope anyway, I added. Yes, so we hope. But for now, we are safe. He stacked some papers up and stood, facing me. His eyes were blood, shot and were shadowed by dark purple rings. I feel like this isn't over, Maggie. I feel like there's something I missed, some loose end I forgot to tie up. Connor. I put my hand on his shoulder. It'll be all right. Look, it's late. Go to bed. You look tired. Yeah, I think I will. Good night, Maggie. After he put some papers away, we both walked out of the library. He went one way to his room and I went the other to mine. When I opened the door, I immediately realized that something was different. The two small beds were replaced with one large one. There was a dresser with two unpacked bags in front of it. In one corner was a small desk with a closed laptop and a rolling computer chair. Hey, I turned to see Andrew standing behind me. He smiled down at me, putting his hand on my hip. You like it. It's perfect, Andrew. I got up on my tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. I know, he said, kissing me again. Of course, we're going to get our own place eventually. My family has money. I just need to reconnect with them. Though I doubt they've really noticed I've been gone. But either way, we'll be just fine. We can even go back to school if we want. Everything's going to work out great. There is one final thing to resolve. One final secret to get out into the open. Andrew, there's something we need to talk about. I led him into the room and closed the door behind us. Is everything all right? He asked, a concerned look on his face. I could feel him trying to get into my mind, but I kept it shielded. I wanted to do this my way. I sat him down on the bed and took his hand in mine. I kissed it, then pressed it to my stomach. Andrew, you're going to be a father. I smiled nervously. We're going to be parents. His eyes went wide for a moment as he looked rapidly from where our hands lay on my stomach, to my face and back again. I mean, are you sure? Here, I said. I opened my mind to him, and let him see what I knew. My shield was always inside me, but it was only effective when I let it expand out of my body. When another life was under the shield, I could feel it, like a spark in my vision. With the shield inside me, however, I could feel the life growing inside of me. Can you feel it, Andrew? Oh my God, he whispered. It's beautiful. He looked up at me, his eyes glowing. We're going to have a baby. He threw his arms around me and squeezed me tight. He pressed his forehead to mine. I love you, he whispered. I know. I love you too, he kissed me, soft and loving. What will we name it? I don't know. It's only a month along, but what about Amelia? If it's a girl, of course. He looked off into space for a moment, trying out the name in his mind. Amelia, I like it. Our little Amelia, he smiled at me, his eyes glowing with love and pride. He held me in his arms and laid us down on our bed. His arms held me like armor, protecting me from any bad memory I ever had. I felt safe, the only place I had ever felt safe in my life. Every muscle in my body relaxed and I felt as I could breathe again. As soon as he held me to his body, my eyes closed in bliss. I felt at home there, like I belonged. I nuzzled my face into his neck and pressed myself as close to him as humanly possible. He tightened his grip around my waist and intertwined his legs with mine. Everything was all right. Max Spidey, my faded mate. White splashed around me and my room spun with the beat of the heavy techno music the DJ was playing. And from now on, everything was all right. The end. Thank you all for joining me in the wild world of Wild Werewolf. I hope you had an amazing time. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments and likes, and come back for more wild adventures. See you next time.